Sue Baars is a licensed professional counselor and marriage and family therapist living in Irving, Texas, where she's privileged to work with a team of therapists at her private practice. Sue has worked extensively in the field of counseling since 1986 in both hospital and outpatient settings, and focuses her work on the integration of the Christian anthropology, that is to say, the understanding of the human person of St. Thomas Aquinas, with the treatment of a variety of emotional and spiritual problems, among them emotional deprivation disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and scrupulosity. She's also a popular presenter at Catholic conferences around the country and has been a frequent guest on EWTN's Women of Grace. She often presents the work of her late father, psychiatrist and author Conrad Baars, a pioneer in the field of Catholic psychology. Sue was on the faculty of the Institute for Priestly Formation, where she taught diocesan seminarians, and she's a past president of the Catholic Psychotherapy Association and holds a doctorate in family therapy from Texas Women's University. Our topic this evening, as you can see on either side of me, anger and forgiveness. And it's particularly beautiful because the gospel proclaimed in every Catholic church throughout the world today is the Lord's Prayer, which includes the prayer to forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Welcome, Sue, for helping us in this invitation from the Lord.
Can you hear me okay now? Okay. Thank you so much again, Father, for that introduction. And I wanted to say before I forget, because I'm really good at forgetting, that there are books in the back. I've just brought two different books that were written by my father that I've referred to in the other talks that I gave. And then the book that is my father's autobiography, Doctor of the Heart, about his time in Buchenwald concentration camp. I talked about that Sunday night. I don't think we have any more copies here, but it's just being republished by a new publisher. And so it is on Amazon now, just as of like a couple days ago. And you can get it there, or you can go to my website, which is baarsinstitute.com. And the name Baars is spelled with two A's, B-A-A-R-S. So you're welcome to do that. And I don't know how to do it yet, but because I didn't have any copies, it just didn't work out that way that we would have a lot of copies with the new edition. If you want to purchase it through my website, I'll give you like $5 off. What I have to figure out is I have to give you a code, and I'll have to send it to Father Dan, and you can ask him for the code, and then it'll automatically take it off. So whatever you would like to do. All right, so tonight we're talking about anger and forgiveness, and it was, as Father Dan just said, as he was reading the gospel today, it was like, whoa, this is so providential. You know, this is like, there's no coincidences with the Lord, that he was talking about, you know, I think it was the apostle said, teach us how to pray, and he gives them the Lord's Prayer, and he's talking about that we must forgive if we want to be forgiven. So what I'll talk about first is just talk about anger, and I don't have any particular slides on anger here, but I would say that, is this too loud? It's okay. Maybe it's just my ears. I would say that the emotion of anger is often misunderstood and sort of feared by some people. And some people that I have met in my office and in other places, especially Christians, seem to think that Christians should never be angry, that they have this misunderstanding that to be Christ-like means you should never be angry at anybody or have any kind of irritation. So sometimes they're apologizing, or sometimes they're just sort of repressing that. And often, I think, especially nowadays, there's so much violence in the world. I think some people will associate anger with people who are hurtful, or they intimidate or manipulate other people, or they're violent. So it may seem to them like anger doesn't have any place in our lives. But in reality, God has created anger as one of our emotions so that it helps us to confront injustice. So it's not just all our willpower that has to do all the work. And in fact, all of the work that my father did as a Catholic psychiatrist, and I follow in his footsteps, is based on the psychology of St. Thomas Aquinas. And very briefly, St. Thomas identified 11 passions, which we call emotions now, one of which is anger. And he looked at it as one of these emotions that actually sort of gives you energy on the natural level, with your reason guiding what to do, making the choice of what to do, and your will making that choice. But the anger actually gives you the energy to confront something. You know how it's sort of hard to, maybe if you don't feel anything, it's hard to stand up for something in particular that you believe in. But if somebody really maybe hurts somebody that you love, it's like the anger comes more readily, and you can say, no, 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 they were okay with this, they didn't do that. But if it's just all of our willpower, that makes life very difficult to live, doesn't it, right? So even irritation and annoyance, even though sometimes we're not going to express it, it has its place in our lives. Now, I'd also say, and this is, you'll find this information in the book back there or the website, on feeling and healing your emotions. And this is the idea that we could say the emotions are psychological motors. So they're motors that, on the one hand, the emotions that St. Thomas talks about of love and liking, desire and joy, and then their opposites, which are hate, believe it or not, we can hate, hate or dislike, aversion and sadness. Those are emotions that just, I am moved by something. Like if I look at a beautiful painting, or I see an attractive person, like I might be moved to, or I hear beautiful music, I might be moved to tears by that, or I might be very interested in looking at that painting or whatever it is. And so those are more like, it just arises in me and it tells me that something is, I experience it as a good or as a bad for me. But these emotions, the emotion of anger is, St. Thomas says, it's in a different category. And he called them the irascible passions. It just means they have to do more with anger or with movement. And those are hope, and its opposite is despair, just as an emotion. It's not the sin of despair, right? And this emotion just simply means I don't have hope that I can, say, pass my exam, or I don't think that I can, I don't feel that I'm capable of making this kind of commitment, right? So it's sort of like a despair, like a hopelessness, right? So that's not a sin, that's just something that we feel. And then there is courage, and its opposite is fear. And then St. Thomas said the last of that category is anger. And anger, as I said a minute ago, is simply an emotion that gives us the energy to move, to correct an injustice. And also, as I said, it's our mind informed by what we've learned about people, about society, or whatever, or by the faith, that helps us think through, like, well, what are my options in this case? Well, I don't know if you all remember the term going postal. Some of you do, right? And a lot of people are doing that nowadays. You know, like, I'm going to do something violent. Well, that's not an option, right, for me. Or I'm going to go and yell at the principal of the school where my children are. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Or I'm going to go tell my boss off because he shouldn't have embarrassed me in the meeting today. Well, then I might lose my job, right? So my reason is helping me to discern, I've got all this feeling here, what should I do about it? And maybe one of these options is, I think I'm so angry right now that I need to sit down, get a glass of water, and I'm going to go talk to somebody about it, not the person I'm angry at, and I'm going to cool off, and I'm going to see how I feel tomorrow. And maybe tomorrow I'm still angry enough, but not this angry, that I decide I'm going to go and talk to the person, and this is what I'm going to say. This is how I'm going to do it, right? This is my goal. Or it could be, in this case, it's not going to make any difference. Or maybe the next day you go, wow, I am so glad I didn't say anything to that person, to my spouse, because I would have really blown it, right? So we wait, right? We learn how to direct the feeling and direct anger. So it has its place, and even the Lord got angry in the temple, didn't he? Right, where he made a whip out of cords and he threw them out. Right. Well, that wasn't very nice, but it's not. Christianity is not about being nice. It is about being good. It's a different four-letter word, right? It's about how we are, what does it look like to be good? And even anger has its place there. And of course, as I was saying before, people can use anger in a bad way. They can use it aggressively, which is not right, and there's various reasons why they will do that. They make a bad choice, they've never been taught, et cetera, et cetera. And this is anger that's used aggressively. And really, by nature, human beings are not aggressive, but we can learn to be aggressive, or we can never learn how to just be assertive, right? We're meant to learn how to be assertive, which is that I have rights and you have rights, and I want to talk about what the boundaries are here, right? But I have to learn how to do that, right? The other time that I can think of where our Lord got angry, can you think of another time besides the money changers? Who were the people that got on his nerves the most? The Pharisees, right? And so what did he call them one time? You whitewashed tombs. Well, that's not exactly your nice, let's be friends type of, comment. And why would he do that? My thought is, I haven't read this anyplace, my thought is because we know that Christ always did the perfect thing for each person, that it must have been that they had such hardened hearts that he had to hit them really hard where it hurt. And of course, they didn't follow up in the right way. They didn't respond in the right way where they could have. They were given an opportunity. They decided they were going to kill him, right? Which was also part of the mission, right? But our Lord said that. He also said, woe to you lawyers, and woe to you Pharisees. You strain in a gnat and you swallow a camel. You're teaching people all the wrong way. But I'm sure he wasn't just like, oh, could I have your attention, please? Or could I talk to you right now? I'm sure he was very bold and strong. And I think that was one of the reasons, besides the other capacity he had for tenderness, I think his strength and his boldness and his assertiveness was probably one of the things that attracted people to him in his time. And I think that's probably what attracts some of us too, is that he speaks the truth when we read the scriptures, right? So just as the Lord used his reason, and of course informed by what he knew as God, to do the right thing with those feelings, that's how we are also to learn how to live, to manage our anger and direct it, and sometimes restrain it, because love also can express itself not always in an outward expression, but in self-restraint, right? When I am willing to say no to myself for the good of another person, right? That is actually maybe the highest form of love that Jesus shows us on the cross, right? That he restrained what he wanted in his human will was not to go through that, and he was obedient, right? So let's talk about forgiveness for a little bit, since that's why I'm here. Have you ever Well, I'll ask you a couple questions, and you don't have to talk out loud, but think about this. Have you ever actually gotten to the point of forgiving someone, and then have you ever noticed that maybe like a day or two later or a while later, that they might bring it up, or somebody brings up that, whatever the issue was, and you actually can't remember what it was about? Have you ever had that happen? Well, it's a very wonderful thing, because it's the sign that you really have let go of whatever the offense was, right? And I should also tell you, I should back up here. This is my little overview for you, okay? This is, I'm going to be talking, I've already talked about anger. I'm going to give you examples of forgiveness, and then what forgiveness is and what it is not. And then I'm going to talk about unforgiveness and the obstacles that we encounter when we will not forgive. But the other thing I'm just going to ask you to think about, and you don't have to say anything, but have you ever found yourself being very bitter about something? And have you ever, and this is just a reflection because I've been there, have you ever noticed then, as you realize how bitter you are about this issue or person or whatever it is, something in the past, something in the present, what that does to you? Does it affect how you feel physically? Does it interfere with your thinking? Does it consume you? So I want you to sort of think through, sort of carry that with you for a little bit as we're talking. So what I want to give you now is some examples of forgiveness. And some of these, I know one person came up and was asking me about, or talking about this lady. But Eva Kor was a Jewish woman who survived Auschwitz. And are any of you familiar with her name? I was reading about her because I thought I need to know a little bit more about her today. She actually died in Terre Haute, and she's buried there. So she actually ended up in Indiana. But she and her twin were taken to Auschwitz. I think they'd been about 10 years old. And because they were twins, I think it was Mengele, Dr. Mengele, or one of the guards, spotted them with their mother, and then somehow the guard went up to the mother and got the information out of her that they were actually twins, and so they were taken away from their mother, and of course the mother went to the gas chamber. But they were actually experimented on. I don't even know if she knew exactly what was happening at the time, but she was a real survivor, and she and her twin survived Auschwitz. And I don't know how long this took, but she, it must have been probably maybe not too long, or maybe in the 70s or 80s, that she must have decided that she was carrying all this bitterness and this resentment because she had a lot of health problems because of the experiments that had been done on her. That she needed to forgive. And she found one of the doctors who had been part of this, and she went to him, and the blessing was, he expressed remorse for what he had done, and she forgave him. And what she said about this, she said some very beautiful things. She said, "Forgiveness is a seed for peace. Victimhood and anger are seeds for war." And she also said, I didn't put this in the slides, but she said that forgiveness for her was like finding the cure for cancer. That she, and this is my thought, I didn't really read this, but it was like that she realized her unforgiveness was eating her alive, and that she needed to let go of it. And that she actually went to the lengths to find this man, how providential that he regretted what he did, and that they were reconciled. And she forgave, I don't know how she did this, but she actually forgave Dr. Mengele, and she forgave Adolf Hitler, because her whole family had been killed in the camps. The next person, Father Ubald, and I'm not going to even try to say his last name, but Father Ubald was from Rwanda. And some of you may be familiar that in 1994, Rwanda was involved in this horrible genocide between the two tribes. And one of the tribes, I think, set up a particular event where the president was killed in his plane, and then they took advantage of that and they began killing the other tribe. And as you can see, it was over 1 million people who were massacred, and I don't know how long that took. It might have been like 4 or 5 months or something like that. You might have also heard of Immaculée. Have you ever heard her speak or read her book, Left to Tell, which is really very powerful? She also talks about forgiveness, the need to forgive. And Father Ubald, there are some, if you really want to hear some wonderful testimony, you should go to YouTube and look him up and listen to what he has to say. His story was that he wasn't a priest at the time. I don't know how old he was, but he, I think 85 members of his extended family were killed. He had, and I think their parishes must be much bigger than ours, 45,000 of his parishioners had been massacred. And his mother also was, had been ordered to be killed, and she died. I think one of his brothers survived. But he ended up realizing that I think he eventually became a priest, probably later in the 90s. And the Lord really directed him that he had to let this go. And he said it was very difficult, but he actually was, he went to the prison where after the genocide was over, a lot of the people that committed these acts of murder were sent to prison, including the man who had ordered the killing of Father Ubald's mother. And of course, it was a very brutal thing. I mean, it wasn't just like by firing squad. It was, and I won't even say it, but you can read about it. But he went to, he met this man in prison, and the man, I think, had remorse also. And Father Ubald said it was very difficult, but he forgave him. And he said it was something that really freed him. And then, I guess it was maybe within the next 6 months or so, somehow he met this man's son. And I think the man's wife had died somehow. She wasn't in the picture anymore. And he met the son, and the son was crying. And he was talking to him, and the son said, "I don't have any money to even go to school." And so he was barely surviving because his father was in prison. And so Father Ubald took it upon himself to pay for this boy's tuition. And then 10 years later, even at that point, his father was still in prison, and he was paying for that boy's university tuition. He actually went that far. And so he said these things. He said, "The secret of peace is forgiveness." And he said, when you don't forgive, you have a great weight to carry. And he also said, I didn't put this on the slide, he said, unforgiveness is like we are in a prison, and forgiveness is the key to getting out. He also said, if you don't forgive, you die spiritually. And you can imagine, right? Or maybe some of us don't have to imagine, because we've been carrying something or a grudge, and maybe we don't even realize it. Sometimes I think until we really maybe are led through a good examination of conscience, we don't remember that we were hating this person, or we had some bitterness against them, or we said we would never forgive them, right? We'd forgotten it. And so it's really important to really examine our conscience and look at, Lord, show me if I'm holding anything against anybody. The other thing Father Ubald said is, extreme horror requires extreme forgiveness. Can you imagine? It's incredible that these people did this. I'm going to also talk a little bit about, have you ever heard of this lady, Corrie ten Boom? She's probably a little bit more known. And she was in Ravensbrück. She was a young woman, I think, and she and her sister, and I think her father were taken to Ravensbrück, and I can't remember the other camp that went with it. And it was a very difficult situation, of course. And so I just tell you a little bit about that. And they were Christian. They were from the Netherlands. And I think her father was a watchmaker, so she was involved in helping him in his store, which I think was downstairs from where they lived. And so they were imprisoned. I think her father and her sister eventually died in Ravensbrück, but she was liberated. But in that camp, she and her sister were lucky to, providentially, they stayed together. And they were in this barracks. And of course, they were there for months, I think, before liberation, or maybe a year, I don't know. And they were in this horrible place where there was a lot of fleas, it was full of death, people would die all the time. They were both very afraid. But then one day, her sister Betsy, as I said, they were Christian, came up with this idea, and she said, she came to Corrie and she said, this might help us. And she said, 1 Thessalonians says, St. Paul says to us, give thanks in all circumstances. And Corrie in her book said very quickly, I can't give thanks for the fleas, because they bite, right? And so Betsy said that she could give thanks that the two of them were together as many families had been split apart. So Corrie said, well, I can give thanks for that, but not for the fleas. And then Betsy realized, she said, we went through this whole process of coming here, but the guards had not checked my luggage, so I still have my Bible. And so Corrie said, well, I can be thankful for that, but not for the fleas. And so she said, she was very adamant. She said, under no circumstances can I give thanks for fleas. They're horrible little pests. It's like a little plague that we live with. But eventually, what they realized was that the guards, and this is something they had been afraid of, the guards had not assaulted them physically because the guards didn't want to go in the barracks that were full of fleas. And so she began to give thanks for fleas, right? Okay. And so she reflected later on, when she came out of the camp, and of course her family, her father and her sister were gone, or they were dead, she went around the world, I think, for many, many years, probably the rest of her life, talking about Christian witness, right, and what had happened in the camps and these kind of things. And she also talked about, as a Christian, forgiveness. And so there's this other story that I'm going to read to you from the end of her book, and it relates to our topic tonight. So this is Corrie ten Boom speaking. She says, it was at a church service in Munich that I saw him, the former SS man who had stood guard at the shower room door in the processing center at Ravensbrück. He was the first of our actual jailers that I had seen since that time. This, I don't know, might have been a few years after the war. And suddenly it was all there, the room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, and Betsy's pain-blanched face. So the women, of course, were naked. He came up to me, this is after her talk, as the church was emptying, beaming and bowing. How grateful I am for your message of forgiveness, Fraulein, he said, to think that, as you say, he has washed my sins away. His hand was thrust out to shake mine, and I, who had preached so often to the people the need to forgive, kept my hand at my side. Even as the angry, vengeful thoughts boiled through me, I saw the sin of them. Jesus Christ had died for this man. Was I going to ask for more? Lord Jesus, I prayed, forgive me and help me to forgive him. I tried to smile. I struggled to raise my hand. I could not. I felt nothing, not the slightest spark of warmth or charity. And so again, I breathed a silent prayer. Jesus, I cannot forgive him. Give me your forgiveness. As I took his hand, the most incredible thing happened. From my shoulder, along my arm, and through my hand, a current seemed to pass from me to him, while into my heart sprang a love for this stranger that almost overwhelmed me. And so I discovered that it is not on our forgiveness any more than on our goodness that the world's healing hinges, but on his. When he tells us to love our enemies, he gives, along with the command, the love itself. And I would say, add to that, what she's saying is, when he commands us to forgive, he gives us the power to forgive itself, because we cannot, right? So it's beautiful. I would say all three of these examples are examples of radical forgiveness. And I read those and I think, if they can do that, here I've got these little things in my life that I need to forgive. I need to do that, right? It really challenges us. And of course, Jesus says, as we said before, he says in the Lord's Prayer, he tells us, give us this day our daily bread, the Eucharist, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So now let's just move. I could give you different parables, but I think you are familiar with them and you probably don't need them right now. But I want to give you, this is a definition. Maybe many years ago, probably 35 years ago, I worked with another therapist who had been a Methodist minister. And he became one of my best friends, he and his wife. And he gave a definition of forgiveness, which I think I have found very helpful. So it is this: forgiveness is an act of my will whereby I give up the right to punish either other people or myself. And so it's simply an act of the will, right? Does not mean that forgiveness isn't a feeling. We want the feeling to come, but what I believe is that when, I think it was Andrew, was it Andrew said to Jesus, how many times should I forgive my brother? 7 times? And I'm thinking, I wouldn't even think, one would be plenty, right? It's like 7. And what does Jesus say? No, 70 times 7, right? And how many is that? 490, right? That's a lot of forgiveness, right? But I think that if we apply this application, this idea of forgiveness, we forgive, but then we have to, since in a sense my will and my intellect are doing the forgiving, my will, my feelings don't always just go, oh, this is wonderful. It doesn't always happen to us like what happened for Corrie ten Boom, right? But my emotions are still churning, and they may need time to catch up to what I have decided, what I have willed to let go of, what I have willed to forgive. And so I actually have to help them, right? So when I know I have made the decision to forgive, I have forgiven, I have obeyed the Lord's command. But when I'm still angry, it doesn't mean that I haven't forgiven. It means I might have to let go again, because I'm living in the world and that person's, whatever they've done or not done, still hurts me, and I have to help my feelings catch up with what my will has done, what I've decided. Does that make sense? I mean, if you have questions, let's talk about it after I'm finished with all the ideas here. The other thing, and this isn't so much a definition, but Corrie ten Boom came up with this, the idea of what is forgiveness. She said it was like forgiveness is like ringing a bell on a rope. Well, that unforgiveness is like ringing a bell on a rope. And then when you stop pulling the rope, what happens with the bell? Does it just stop? I mean, it'll ring for a while, right? Because it's got momentum, right? So I think she's sort of saying the same thing. It's like, it's not that we haven't forgiven, it's that there are things that are still the feelings are still gonna reverberate, and we're still gonna remember, and we might still be mad, right? But then we still have to go, what do I do now with these feelings when I meet this person? How am I gonna do that? We have to work that out, right? That's the 70 times 7. In a way, it's like saying, my emotions don't know what my will just did, right? Because they just sort of have a life of their own, right? They're going to come up on their own, and I have to say, we've already worked on that, let's calm down again, right? So it's not like just say, I can't feel like that. It's that they're going to have a life, and I have to moderate that as I go along. Now, here's some other ideas I want to give you, what forgiveness is not, because a lot of times people think forgiveness is these things. And forgiveness is not erasing what happened, because if there was a need for forgiveness, there probably was an offense, even if it was unintentional, right? Sometimes the person doesn't intend that, whatever they did. It's not excusing what happened. Well, he didn't mean it. I mean, and sometimes that does help us. Sometimes that is the truth, right? But when it's not the truth, we don't want to excuse it. We want to face it straight on, right? It's like this does, actually what really needs to happen is I need to forgive the person. It's not denial that there was an offense or that it was okay. Because look at these things in the concentration camps and what happened to Father Ubald, right? Maybe you can think of things in your own life. It's like, no, I mean, these things really, they were not okay. It also means, it doesn't mean that I forget. Now, I started off by saying, have you ever had a time when you just sort of forgot about it? That, I think, is a gift and a grace, right? And we hope to have that I have let go so completely that I can't really remember why I was mad at that person. And that's a grace that I think we also need to ask for. It also forgiveness doesn't mean that I'm avoiding conflict. And premature forgiveness is a way, and there's like a little reflection on my website, the Baars Institute, that talks about premature forgiveness. And that the idea there is that when people are not assertive and they don't want to confront somebody, they will just go ahead and forgive them right away, because then I don't have to deal with any of this, like whether it's abuse or the person was mean to them or whatever it was. It's like, well, I've forgiven them. So it's like, I don't have to deal with it. Well, it's sort of pseudo-forgiveness, right? Because it's like, it's more about, I'm just going to avoid this because I don't want to have any kind of conflict with another person. So what does forgiveness actually do for us? It frees us to be at peace. And it unbinds us from the offense and the person who has offended us. I'll go back just a step here. I have heard, and I bet some of you have heard this too, is that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping the person that you're angry at dies, right? It's like it just consumes us, right, when we do not forgive. So it is really a way of freeing us. And what is the ultimate example of forgiveness? We have it right here, right? Jesus from the cross, right? Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. right? It is amazing. This is amazing. This is radical forgiveness, right? This is the grace of forgiveness. And we need to go to him when we can't forgive, or when we're really, I don't want to forgive, right? Even if we can just say, Lord, you're going to have to help me, that's a step in the right direction, right? Even if I cannot let go because this was so painful, it was so horrific, it changed my life, whatever those reasons are that are very valid, go to Christ, go to Jesus, talk to the priest. I'm stuck. I can't do this, and I don't want to. And to just even to do that is a way of beginning to loosen how unforgiveness has bound you. Unforgiveness also weakens us, right? It makes us bitter and resentful. And can you think of any good things that come out of bitterness and resentfulness? I didn't think so. Me neither. It's just it sort of keeps you stuck in a state, and I have seen people that are so bitter that it's like their whole life is consumed by that, and it's really awful to see, because it's almost like you can't get through. They're bound by it. They're stuck inside of it. What are the reasons for unforgiveness? Well, lots. I don't want to forgive. I just don't want to do it. I don't like the person. It's unfair. I can't forgive. I don't know how. If I do, they'll do it again. Well, then there's a misunderstanding of what forgiveness means. If I forgive, it means it's okay, which is not true. I want to be right. I hate it that they're making me look bad. I get to hold this against them because fill in the blank. I can remain protected. I can justify being unforgiving to stay safe because I don't want to be hurt again. I don't want to look like I'm less than, like it's okay. I don't want other people to think that. I think some of the other things are, then I don't have to trust God with that. I don't have to talk to him about it because I'm going to just take care of it. And unforgiveness, I think also, as we go forward in life, it keeps us bound sometimes where we can't open up to the new people in our life or our spouse because we're sort of held back by the past hurts because we really haven't faced them and let go of them. And I'm not saying that that's an easy process or perfunctory, like we can do it like that. I'm not saying that at all, because those things are a challenge. That's why I have a job, right, as a therapist. We also can avoid loving our enemies, right? And here I want to make this distinction too. When Jesus says, love your enemies, he is not referring to your feelings. Because when you have a real enemy, someone who has really hurt you or hurt someone that you love, those feelings are not there. And actually, we cannot command our feelings to be a certain way at a certain moment, and really the Lord can't either. Like if I said, okay, it's like 8 o'clock, and maybe you just ate 20 minutes ago, and I said, be hungry. Could you do it? No, right? Or if I said, everybody be sad. When you're like, why? Then you'd be more puzzled, right? So when he says love your enemies, he is saying you must will the good of your enemy, right? You must treat them well. You must act with justice, right? So that's on the level of the will. And that is also talked about in the book, Feeling and Healing Your Emotions. Because a lot of people, a lot of Christians especially, come into my office and they're struggling with that because they're thinking, I can't love Uncle George after what he did to me or did to my mom and dad, or so-and-so abandoned us. I can't feel love for them ever, right? That would be a miracle, and that's not going to happen. So it's looking at, like, how do I make that decision to let go and to forgive? And this idea of what forgiveness is, it's giving up the right to punish that person, and also including myself, right? Because who are we hardest on? Ourselves, right? So it's like I have to really work on that as well. I'm going to briefly talk about, I don't know if you all are familiar with Neil Lozano. He wrote a book called Unbound, and he also wrote a book called The Older Brother Returns, about the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son. And just briefly, he shifts the focus from the father who's welcoming the prodigal son back to the house, to the older brother. And he looks at him and what is the older brother doing? What is he feeling? He's jealous, he's angry, he's feeling a little bitter, he's feeling a little unloved, right? And, you know, he's probably thinking, you know, like, what is my father doesn't really love me, he just loves my brother, right? But what is he looking for? He's looking for perhaps justice or his father's affection or whatever. And he's certainly sort of nursing a grudge there. And I think what this author, Neil Lozano, does is he's challenging us to look at, like, which of those brothers am I? Or am I the father in that story? Am I the younger brother? Am I the older brother? Am I a combination of all those, right? He's sort of challenging us to look at ourselves to see, you know, how do I feel when somebody else gets something that I feel like I deserved, right? So I want to end and sort of echo what Corrie ten Boom said, because oftentimes we Christians, we Catholics, I think, we forget that it is Jesus Christ, not you or me, that forgave sin. We seem to think that we can work at forgiveness, but not include Jesus in it. And we need to. And so at the end here, you might want to take a picture of this, and I'll walk through it here. This is just like in your prayer time, especially during Lent, I want to challenge you to ask the Lord to show you what He wants you to know about your life, your childhood, your wounds, your hurts, and the areas where perhaps you have made bitter root judgments. And that's a whole other talk, but bitter root judgments are judgments that we made about a person rather than just their behavior, perhaps when we were young, and we've just blocked them out. We don't consider them at all. We hold it against them. And so, like, as those become apparent, ask the Lord that you might join Him, and imagine this, in Gethsemane, where He took on all the sins of the world. Give Him any sins you have committed or judgments that you've made about others or about yourself. Ask Him to help you forgive whoever you need to forgive, and ask His forgiveness for resentments and grudges that you are holding on to. And if you cannot do it, ask Him to do it for you. Invite the Holy Spirit to come in. Like, I always have a little image in my mind of, like, there's little doors on my heart, and I throw them open, and I say, Lord, come in. I give you permission, because the Lord is not a thief. He is not coming into your heart and your mind and your whole self with a bulldozer. This is a spiritual director told me this one time. He doesn't come in like that. The Holy Spirit responds when you invite Him in, and He comes in with a little feather duster. And He uses this little feather duster to clean up your soul. So I want you to go with Jesus to the cross and let those sins of unforgiveness or whatever sins be crucified there with Him. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for being so attentive and for being so diligent and coming to the mission. It has been, honestly, such a privilege to be here and to speak with you and see your beautiful parish. And you obviously love your parish and your priest so much. And the oratory, I had a chance to be there today. as I told Father Dan, I walked in and I almost started crying. It was so beautiful. You are really blessed and graced, and I hope you take advantage of these things. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions or comments or things that you're struggling with. Yes.
So, with someone, like you mentioned, a spouse, and like maybe they have past hurts or stuff, and they keep either hurting, I'm speaking theoretically, like the other spouse or the people, like how do you help them move past? Or like, do you just keep loving on them, or how do you help them work through maybe some things that they can't forgive for,
Right.
trauma that's happened?
I'll repeat it. Yeah, I will. So the question is, when you have a spouse who is hanging on to some things and dealing with some things probably that need forgiveness, how do you help them to do that? Well, the first thing I'd say is you want to be prayerful, right? You want to pray for the person, and you want to be in a state of grace so that you can, and also be attentive to them. You also want to affirm them, like we were talking about last night. But I think it's going to be individual with whoever the spouse is, right? And like, how much can they take? Because sometimes they're going to take your very good intentions as nagging, right? And then what will they do? They're going to hunker down and get their heels in. And so I think we want to be aware of how they might respond to things, because I think it's St. Thomas Aquinas says, a thing must be given according to the mode of the receiver. Like, what is my spouse like? That's the mode, is like, what is he like? Like, what is she like? And if I say this, will they receive it? And maybe either I have to not say it, or I have to say it in a different way. Like, I have to speak their language, right? So I think we can set an example. Maybe you can be direct, depending on how he is, and to say something like, hey, I noticed that you're struggling with something. Would you mind if we talked about that? Could I ask you about that and just find out where you're at with that? And then see if he will open up or she will open up. So, and then it's more like, I would say you start with just reflecting and saying, that sounds like you've been struggling a lot, or that sounds like that's really deep. Is that right? And because now you're affirming what he is saying. You're meeting him where he is at, right? And then let's just see where that goes, right? Because that's not going to guarantee anything happens. Sometimes people go, I don't want to talk about it, right? And then we have to wait, right? We have to wait. Until they're ready. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. That's a good question. The question is, if you've forgiven someone and then the person, say, comes up to you and they do it again, and you have this emotional response that you had before, like you get angry, have you forgiven, or do you still need to forgive the person? Is that the question? Pretty much. Okay, you've forgiven them, or you've forgiven them and you're afraid they're going to do the same thing again. Well, there's a thing called, in relationships, there's a thing called boundaries that we need to learn how to use, even as Christians, right? So we need to learn, how do I set a boundary, or how do I make even a verbal boundary, which helps the person not go there again, right? So that's one thing. But I would say, first of all, in answer to that first part of your question, is that if you have forgiven, you've forgiven, right? But that doesn't mean the person won't do it again, right? And I'm still upset about the first time, and now they just did it again. But now, that's where I would say, now we have to start thinking, is there a way for me to set boundaries with this person, or give some space, or when they start saying the same thing, that I need to come up with some kind of polite answer and walk away, right? How do I manage that so that I don't actually let them do the same thing to me again, right? Or I don't let them do something harmful, because it's not only not good for me, it's not good for them, right? So it's just sort of a challenge to think, what can I do with that? But with your initial question, no, it doesn't mean you haven't forgiven. I mean, just because I'm angry or they do it again doesn't mean I didn't forgive them before. They just did it again, right? And now I have to forgive again, but I also have to learn how to live with this person, or deal with a person if I'm not living with them, right? Okay. Anybody else? Is this sort of a challenge? And what do you think about this last, in your prayer time? What will that be like? Is that something you're willing to do? Yeah, okay, good, all right.
And Sue, if I could add a biblical footnote. Yeah. Peter's the one who asks, how many times do I have to forgive? 7 times. And when Jesus gives the response, 70 times 7, it's actually a reference in the book of Genesis. After Cain kills Abel, Cain is afraid that somebody's going to do that to him. And so Cain needs some reassurance. He has the mark on his forehead. But one of Cain's offspring down the line, Lamech, is not afraid of the killing. He actually brags about it. And he says that Lamech, he's speaking of himself, Lamech is avenged 70 times 7. So it's what you were saying before about the seed. The seed of forgiveness is the seed of peace. The seed of unforgiveness is the seed of war. Yeah. So in the book of Genesis, it's spelling out that refusals to forgive ultimately curdle into vengeance, and then everything's out of control. So when Peter says, or when Jesus says to Peter, you have to forgive 70 times 7, that redemptive forgiveness is the sort of love through the piercing vengeance. So when I found that out, I was blown away that it's not just a mathematical thing. Jesus is piercing our tendency for vengeance to get out of control.
Beautiful.
That's the 70 times 7.
Beautiful. I hope you have your mic on, because I don't think I can repeat all that.
Oh, it's all right. That's all right.
It is on? I think it was on, because everybody could hear you. Thank you, Father. That's beautiful.
And just one story from our parish for you to use. Some of us know this, but recently one of our longtime parishioners, Don Page, died. And he, in the pro-life cause for decades, was out there day after day in front of the abortion facility in Fort Wayne, endured everything you could imagine in terms of opposition, but also opportunities for conversation. And Don heard this gospel of today, this command to forgive. And the spiritual exercise of that day was, pick the person that you dislike the most and pray for the gift of forgiveness. And when he heard this about this abortionist, George Klopfer, Don wanted to refuse. And at first he just said, no, I can't forgive this guy. And time went by, and Don kept at it, and because the abortionist would taunt him. And one day, something happened where Dr. Klopfer was coming out of the clinic, and he ran right into Don. And spontaneously, something came over Don, and he just blurted out, George, would you be my friend? And Don didn't even know where this came from. And Klopfer didn't know where, and Klopfer was so taken aback, he said, okay. And they would start talking with each other, and Don had to overcome just the disgust. So eventually, the abortionist license was taken away by the state of Indiana. The clinic was shuttered, but the abortionist kept coming back to the clinic because Don was his only friend. He would get out of his car at the close clinic, get in Don's car, and they would speak once a month. And until the day Klopfer died, Don was his only friend and would speak to him honestly, like not just, George, you better make peace with the Lord. You better ask the Lord for forgiveness. The verdict is out on that, but the peace that came over Don Page, he radiated it. And for me, when I think of love your enemies, it's actually important for us to study other people's lives, because I don't think we have it in us to do it in isolation.
Yeah, I
I think the movement of emotional honesty, like the psalmist, and then the surrender, Lord, you made this person. You died and rose to save the person. They're yours. I'm not hostage to this person's stupidity. And then calling down blessings on them, like, Lord, put other people in their life who can help them. The people that I've worked with, that's been the path to the peace. Like this, you've given us the truth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good Christians
Well,
never
thank
say
you
goodbye,
all.
just till we see each other again.
Yes, that's right.
You have to come back again and again.
Yeah. All right. God bless you all. Thank you. Yep.
Dr. Baars, do you think if we continue to pour love and forgiveness into people that they can change?
Well,
Do you believe that as a
turn this on. Hold on.